Welcome back to ＳիվիլՆեթ. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott, and I'm joined today by research fellow at Armenia, Leonid Nersisyan, who specializes in defense. Leonid, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting.
We have a lot to cover, so let's dive into the most, let's say, uncomfortable topic. We're gonna compare the wars with Ukraine and the 2020 Artsakh War. Can you tell us a little bit about the roles of UAVs and I mean, there's so much hype around it that is this stuff overblown? Can you tell us, unpack a little bit a lot of the mythology around this and the impact that it's having between Artsakh and Ukraine, and of course for future warfare, what that would mean?
I think the biggest myth connected to the Karabakh War is that the large combat UAVs like Bayraktar TB2 were something like a wonder weapon, and it was a silver bullet, which was almost impossible to counter. But we see absolute opposite in Ukraine, where that class of drones is not working at all for both sides. And the Bayraktar itself is not working, and Russian versions of drone of the same class, like Inoходец, are also not working. So, and are very easy target for air defense. So that's probably the biggest myth related to UAVs. But there is another big difference in conflicts that for example, in Karabakh, we were not none of the sides relied that much on dual use and especially civilian technologies like the multi-copters with grenade droppers, FPV, first point of view drones and things. And we have a lot of that now in Ukraine, which is interestingly also not a silver bullet, but it's used such massively so that it still got a large impact, and for both sides, even for Russia, which is to be like such a big defense industry and everything, for still the civil procurement of Chinese civilian drones is a big part of what they are doing. So in general, we had examples of modern warfare things going on in both of the conflicts. In our conflict, I would say how Azeris did the suppression of Armenian air defense was something from modern warfare, let's say, that was done mostly by unmanned vehicles and was pretty well organized. Probably with participation of Turkish high-ranked officers and things. In Ukraine, we have very interesting things related to, for example, counter-battery, counter-artillery actions, especially done by Ukrainians. That process came to some fantastic level at the moment when target can be found in 30 kilometers from front line and be destroyed in 5 minutes after being found. That's something which, of course, never happened before. That's like that's how the combination of precision guided munitions work with highest levels of intelligence and data processing and communications, let's say, decision making, partly automated decision making, and that's called C4ISR working in the West, let's say. So it's a really working thing there.
Would you say that artillery is still king on the battlefield?
It's very important, yeah. At the same time, it is king if it's used the new way. Let's say if you implicate it in the newer ways, when you have this modern command and control, modern intelligence, everything tied up with special software, which is reducing dramatically the time needed for making decisions, opening the fire, and in that way, of course, it is still a key asset. Of course, also, if we look at Russia-Ukraine war, we should not forget that it's still old school in many things. Like, for example, we can't compare what Russia doing in air with what West can do in air domain, for example, the manned aviation. And of course, we can't compare what Ukraine also does in that domain because it's very limited. They got a very limited air force. Russia got a larger air force, but it's limited. It has a limited capacity compared to, for example, U.S. Air Force. And maybe artillery would be a less king of the war if, for example, one of the sides had U.S. Air Force assets, let's say. So it could be easier to suppress artillery, for example, and both sides are lacking that capacity. So there's some questions, still some questions, but we can't say that we don't need artillery or tanks. Of course, there are some myths like that also, especially after 2020 war. Even some, I remember even some Western analysts may say something like that.
The tank is obsolete.
Yeah. But I mean, it is obsolete in the way how it's used now. It was used before, but you can update the concept with adding some additional armor, combining it with UAVs and many other things. But is it better to be under drone strike when you are in tank or when you are in a truck, for example? I mean, if it's in tank, it still gives a chance to survive and even continue the mission, and that's the only vehicle which is capable of being so protected.
Well, I wonder if you saw these videos of the combat footage of Hamas using Chinese cheap civilian drones to drop improvised munitions and obliterating Merkava tanks, which are supposed to be some of the strongest tanks on the planet right now. What's your take on that?
That will definitely happen more and more. At the same time, we should not forget that for Israel, this is the first time when they are being countered, let's say, in creative way. And some people even call Israeli army something like army which hasn't got experience, which hasn't been panicking, and now if you will look at the new photos, you will see that Israelis already started installing this sometimes funny looking metal constructions on top of their tanks, which are called, for example, in Russia-Ukraine warfare a lot, it's called magal, I mean, the thing where you do the barbecue. So yeah, that's so they are adapting to that already, and if you look how Israelis are organized, you will see that they really fight the way that they never had been countered really. So they put artillery pieces like close to in 1 meter from each other, like in organizing the battery like in 80s and everything, because nobody really was able to shoot at them before. Now it will change, of course.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Along these same lines, let's talk about the much vaunted Armenian military reforms. There's some information that's obviously being kept private, but from what we do know, what do you make of the ongoing reforms within the armed forces? What are the strengths and weaknesses based on your assessment? We have seen some significantly improved performances, particularly in the clashes last fall. Even oddly enough, within the Karabakh Defense Forces, during the 24 hours of fighting, We did see combat footage of those improvised munitions that we've been talking about on cheap Chinese drones, just dropping bombs on just entire columns of Azeris that have been advancing. So what's your take on all of this? Is somebody sitting at MOD and watching these other conflicts and taking notes and applying what we're learning, or yeah?
Hopefully somebody is sitting and watching. I'm not sure that they do that enough. But if we talk about, for example, grenade dropper civilian drones, that's not government who did that. I mean, it's not they who organized production or procurement of that. That's mostly, unfortunately, that's mostly benevolent activities. Which are sometimes not that well coordinated or financed too. It's normal thing now if it's benevolent but organized by state, like in Ukraine, for example.
Well, even here we're seeing the increased cooperation between the private and the public sector, and the private sector, which didn't exist up until 2 years ago, right? So it's interesting to see the growth of a domestic industry. Even at Digitech last week, there had been some pretty major announcements about procurements from the state. But let's focus on the reforms themselves, the rank and file. What's your take on that?
Yeah, in general, if we talk about reforms, we don't mix it up with procurement, for example, which is, I think, pretty popular in Armenia sometimes, that everything will be solved by buying the weapons from France, India, United States, I don't know.
They're useless if we don't know how to use them.
Yeah, but if we will get a HIMARS tomorrow, we of course won't be able to use it the way Ukrainians are using, let's say. It won't give the same effect. So if we talk about reforms, we have the major ones is the attestation for officers, which means that they do some exam, let's say once per 1 or 2 years, and if they pass it, they get their salary dramatically raised. They also, but I mean, that's a good thing to raise the prestige of being in armed forces, but that's not really like structural reform, for example. And we need to change the order of battle. I mean, how the units are built, like, are we using regiments and army corps, or we're moving to lighter units like battalion tactical groups or brigades, and how that's all is being organized. That's what we need to do. And there, to be fair, if anything is going on, it's let's say everything is off the record and secret, but we don't see it yet anyhow on the battlefield anyway. So even if the process is going on, it's not been accepted yet. That's the problem with other reforms. Like, there is a bill written on territorial defense, the new bill, but it's stuck in institutions already for several months, and the process is not going on. But you never can write an ideal bill on the troops which never existed before. You need to write the enabling law, start ASAP. Then you need to start real on-the-ground activities, see what is going on, see what is the feedback, and then do the amendments, set of amendments number 1, then maybe number 2. And that's the way how it works, not stopping everything from happening. And the same can be told about some other documents of strategic level related to defense. So probably there is a need in more will and understanding that things are needed to be done ASAP, and can be later be refined already while conducting the real activities. Probably that's the situation. I mean, there is also some good things related to training ways of training infantry and things, but this is a very limited. Let's say it's good, but it's limited, and there are like 99 other tasks of the same importance to do.
Yeah, it does seem like the reform process that had been much vaunted after 2020 was essentially stillbirthed until everyone kind of realized that the FSB is no longer going to protect Armenia itself, and that's when it kind of kicked into gear. Tell us, let's kind of flip the switch a little bit here. From the Azerbaijani side of things, there's definitely, I mean, you mentioned it yourself, right? That there's this, they have wonder weapons or so on. I mean, essentially, the 2020 war was an advertising campaign for Bayraktar's products, and from what I've understood in my very limited civilian capacity is that they took a bunch of officers, their special forces, trained them up with Turkish military advisors, used them as the tip of the spear, whereas the rest of the army is still extremely corrupt. I know that their officers are appointed based on loyalty or relations to the ruling family. But there's a lot of opacity around the process of the Azeri reforms. What do we know? Are they really this insurmountable force? Are they this highly professional, almost up to NATO standard army? I've just a funny story before I let you answer. On Reddit, I remember in 2021, somebody had written, "What's your experience like in the Armenian army?" Right, and this was right after the 2020 Karabakh War. And so people were commenting, saying that the officers would bully you. There was a lot of gambling. Most of the time we'd spend sitting and smoking cigarettes, and and you had a bunch of Azeris commenting, "I'm from Azerbaijan, and that's pretty much how it was for me as well," right? So there was kind of this funny, like, we're used to the same system. So can you tell us, has Azerbaijan shaken its Soviet legacy, or what's the depth of their reforms? What do we know for sure?
Good question. Of course, they are not a wonder army. They are not U.S. Army or Israel armed forces. They are not NATO level, but they got some good units, of course, high quality units. That's true. And compared to Armenian armed forces, they are better equipped, and they had a better quality of high-ranking officers, mostly because of having many Turkish advisors, and even more than advisors. So, I mean, even to nowadays, the real commander of general staff of Azerbaijan is Bakhtiar Ersay, the deputy commander of Turkish land forces, which is like his official title is advisor to Azeri head of commander of general staff. But I mean, everybody knows how things are going. So that's probably what made the difference. This high quality of staff commanding, which we lacked a lot. So their operations were much more interesting, much more, let's say, aggressive, more to the point and creative, and ours were very slow and very obvious and never worked, to be fair. None of our operations or attempts to change something ever worked in 2020. But if we talk about, like average infantry guy in armed forces, I don't think that there is a big difference. That I agree. And if we look at the footages you mentioned today, the ones with this limited number of drone strikes during one-day war in Artsakh a few days ago, few weeks already ago, you see how they behave the same way when there's like, I don't know, 30 soldiers all together, very close to each other, and being as vulnerable for such an attack as Armenian servicemen in 2020. So, of course, that's an enemy which can be fought if your armed forces is ready for that. It's not a task which is impossible to complete.
But how can we offset the advantage of let's say, limitless willingness to cooperate from Turkey, which I'm assuming doesn't come at a very high price tag. They have other economic incentives. How can we do that? Actually, I want to bring up, there was an interesting French statement by the what's essentially their Minister of Defense 2 days ago. I can't remember the specific wording, but even in French it was very, very strange, because what it was implying was that France is looking at the possibility to cooperate on the operational level and on the technical level. So in other words, to provide us with stuff, which we will talk about. But that wording was very interesting. They're talking about some kind of potential cooperation. I'm not going to dream that they're going to open some outpost over here manned by the French Foreign Legion, but that does seem to imply that French instructors will be making visits here. What do you make of this? Or the possibility of it, if we're speculating?
I mean, if you're procuring weapons from a country, it will definitely trigger having some advisors, at least, and consultants, as that's pretty new for Armenia. And for, let's say, in NATO countries, the defense procurement is a pretty high level of cooperation. So it's the regulations are harder in that countries. So only the fact that they say that they will freely sell Armenia the defense weapons, which probably is air defense, anti-tank missiles, and many other things, which can be used, which are important for both offensive and defensive operations, to be fair, even the air defense. That's if, for example, let's imagine that Armenia procures 2-3 types of different echelons of range of French air defense assets, like, let's say, from rapid fire automated gun to Mika mid-range air defense missiles. You will need lots of consultancy to organize that. You will send your officers to study there, probably you will, and they will send their consultants to Armenia. That's only the most, let's say, superficial level of what can be under this operational activities he mentioned. It can be probably more. I don't see why Armenia won't do, for example, should not do some drills, for example, at least of limited scale with France at some point. Or why should not they invite some officers for educational purpose, let's say? Why not? I mean, there's lots of things which can be possible. It's not only about having a base in Armenia, let's say.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned this might even be a political question, so if you're unable to answer it, feel free to chime in. But one thing that I found quite interesting, which a lot of people have missed, was that during this time a couple of weeks ago, which unfortunately coincided with the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, were the ongoing joint drills between the United States and Armenia. And there's nothing new about these drills, except two things really stood out to me. Number one, Russia was issuing on average 4 statements condemning these drills every single day. And number two, when we're talking about an exercise of about, it was 185 people doing peacekeeping drills, you had the commander of U.S. Europe and Africa Command, who was in Armenia, so one of the most extremely high-ranking generals within the U.S. Army. And you also had the commander of the 10th Mountain Division, which is a U.S. tip-of-the-spear elite unit, which by their name you can kind of guess what they specialize in. Now, what I'm not able to figure out is what these two guys are doing in Armenia, watching 100 guys running around doing peacekeeping operations. I mean, surely they had better things to do. So I'm wondering, is that also, if only even symbolic, but that Armenia is finally starting to break away from its the claws of its Russian way of doing war, and also we're having more Western openness to provide us with aid up to a NATO standard?
two persons may have been in Armenia because of the situation on the border. Also, that could be also the cause, like trying to deter Azerbaijan somehow.
Yeah, I suspect that was a main thing.
Yeah, but
as well.
as we see, it never worked. Maybe it worked against, let's say, Armenia proper territory because the troops were around the border everywhere. But it never worked against the Artsakh because, I mean, Nagorno-Karabakh was never a priority for West. Unfortunately, they never considered it to. They never had any responsibility to deter Azerbaijan somehow from gaining control over it, and they never been supporting Armenia much on independence of Nagorno-Karabakh. So there is no surprise, not much surprise here. But related to Armenia, as I understand, there is also more will from US to cooperate on some military issues too, more than before. Maybe not defense procurement levels yet, but at least I think in educational and training and organizational issues, they probably are much more open now to discuss things now. So maybe that's the second part of why these two guys were in Armenia, let's say.
Did you see? Pardon me. What do you make of the quality of the weaponry that has already been purchased that we know of? I know that, for example, I mean, France, we don't know what's coming. You already mentioned that they have some good quality air defense systems, but for India, for example, we know that we've purchased the Pinaka systems, which have been battle tested, and they specialize in striking high altitude targets and then scuttling within 30 seconds, right before any kind of response can arrive. We have the Swathi radar stations that can detect where oncoming fire is coming from. I mean, we know that when the Pinakas, when it became public that the Pinakas were ordered, Baku issued an official protest to India. I mean, they're extremely upset. I suspect, obviously, because they spent the last 2 years kind of securing strategic heights in Armenia proper to maintain leverage, and so they are genuinely threatened by these systems. What do you think of the quality of them? What do you think of our potential usage of them? Do you think these were good purchases, good use of taxpayer dollars?
That's pretty hard thing to assess because we are the first client for most of systems we procured. I mean, except Indian Armed Forces, and even for some products, we're the first client. If we talk about the barrel artillery we procured, like 80 AGS, these attacks guns, for example, we procured it before Indian Armed Forces. So they are also already, it passed the test, they are procuring it too now, but we technically were faster than they were. So, I mean, there were some, for example, media articles in India suggesting that a large Armenian delegation was testing all this stuff for several months in India before signing the contracts. Hopefully it's true and it shows that it's working well. With Pinaka, I think it should be better because that's the project which it took, I think, more than 20 years for India to bring from prototype to the serial production, mass-produced weapon.
They've used them against Pakistan. They're actual tested, right?
There was a use of prototype which they liked, and then it started. But then there was a bunch of problems with quality of production. They changed the producers, and then they changed it after the first small contract for serial production. And then the second time they procured a large number, there were already no problems, at least. No, I haven't seen any problems in media being described. And in India, let's say, this different, let's say, institutions in armed forces, like land forces, air forces, they are pretty strong, and sometimes they do, this public type of lobbying of things, so they can write that it got problems openly, even if it's secret. They can just drop it to some media. So probably it's okay now. I suppose it's acceptable level of quality.
Tell us, Leonid, so we've mentioned France, we've mentioned India, we've mentioned potential training with the United States. This is another thing that I noticed kind of went under the radar, which I think is sad. This was about a year ago. Defense Minister Papikyan was in Washington. Armen Grigoryan was in Washington. They met with high-ranking Department of Defense people. And they signed agreements that our officers will start to be trained in West Point and Army War College, which is a significant shift away from Moscow. So we mentioned these three. In your opinion, what are some other countries that we should be focusing on either emulating or expanding defense cooperation with? I mean, I know we signed with Czechia as well. Poland might be interesting. I don't know. What do you think are some countries that we should be working closer together with?
I think that you still need to limit somehow the main partners at some point. You can't be working with everybody simultaneously, but in Europe, Finland is an interesting country to work with. And
that's my go-to as well. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Poland, in terms of, for example, defense industry, is also an interesting country, and not only defense industry. It's a raising military superpower in terms of EU, at least. So.
But they have multiple experts who are able to upgrade, Russian systems and make them effective in today's battlefield. That's what I think is particularly interesting
for example,
about them. They have the know-how.
For example, that, but in general, they're doing great steps forward now in terms of armed forces too. So they will have the largest stocks of, for example, tanks or self-propelled guns.
Yeah. 1,000 K2PL tanks from South Korea and 1,000 self-propelled artillery. Yeah.
So why not? But you can't have you can have some cooperation with everybody, but the main partners probably should be France, US, India, and maybe Finland and Poland. I don't know. That's already like optional things. Like on territorial defense, Finland could be a good partner, for example. They got some.
You don't think Poland can? And I heard the Ukrainian model was based off the Polish territorial defense model.
I mean, Ukrainian model is working now, but initially it was not that good. They had problems with territorial defense in the first stages of war. So, I mean, Poland, you should probably communicate with both and try to understand who is more open, which approach you like more. You should develop your own at the end, so it's never going to be copying, I hope. So copying is not working normally because every country has its own threats, own culture, own resources. So you still need to find your own model then.
Leonid, here's something that personally is keeping me up at night is that, yeah, we can have cooperation. Look, the U.S. can be willing to send us, ballistic missiles and HIMARS tomorrow if that's by some miracle. But the issue is, how do they get here physically, right? We have two borders that are completely shut and controlled by our enemies. We've got Iran, which does not have relations with the West. We do know that they also, there was an episode a year or so ago where due to Russian pressure, they were preventing the arrival of certain Indian equipment. Luckily, that has been resolved, but there's also the risk that happens again. Georgia, during the 2020 war, officially closed their airspace to any weaponry. However, they very plainly, we're tracking the flights. We see that they're allowing all kinds of resupplies to Azerbaijan, but not allowing any of the more important, heavier equipment to get to us. How do we overcome these logistical issues? Is it through ordering different parts and assembling it over here? Is it through growing the domestic industry? What are some solutions to our logistical constraints? And do you have examples of other countries that have solved this or figured this out?
The best example is probably Gaza getting somehow the stuff, or Yemenis getting Iranian stuff, despite all the, let's say, they get it by sea, but it's all should be controlled by Gulf states there who are fighting against Houthis in Yemen, but it's still not possible to control everything. But talking about our situation, can Georgia not let HIMARS coming from US to enter Armenia? I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, if they still want to be in good relations with West, that's going to be challenging to stop Western munitions or equipment coming. So that's going to be a conflict of interest here. Then they should move more towards Russia, which they already do, by the way. They should then do even more, let's say, more in that direction. So they should really become rather Russia's partner than West's partner in that case. But talking about French weapon, for example, I won't be that surprised if Iran lets it through, by the way.
Really?
Because I don't see that there is such a big conflict between these. I mean, there is a conflict, but I think that Iran is interested in the fact that Armenia is not losing a war to Azerbaijan at the moment. So it may consider closing its eyes on some things. But I don't want to discuss too much of these different ways of how this can be done, because that's not hopefully we will never know how things have been done. We will just see the result at the end. There are other ways, but
okay. To conclude, Leonid, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but in your opinion, what would be the top three? Let's say you're now commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and what are your top three reforms that absolutely need to be passed as soon as physically possible? And I hope that someone from MOD is watching this.
Oh, that will be very superficial probably, because most of the questions need a deeper understanding. But first, reform the intelligence agencies should be reformed. I mean the military one, not the others in this case. So most of the, let's say, reforming there should be connected to educational stuff rather than, I mean, you need to have more technical knowledge, you need to be relying more on technical and software tools. So that will be number one. I think that's the place where we were screwed up the most in 2020. Second, order of battle. Of course, I mean, the composition of units move towards more autonomous formations. Third, let's say, reloading the contractor part of army. So, I mean, absolutely new way of hiring people, training people. I mean, not the conscripts, but the contractors. So, both raising the numbers and raising the quality, because quality of our contractor troops, which should be the tip of the spear, as you mentioned with Azeris, it's absolutely awful how it was in 2020. We had contractors who were worse than conscripts, which is like, there are very rare probably examples of that anywhere in the world. So these three probably will be, I mean, what I can think now. There are of course more. I won't say that. There are some more stuff of the same priority, I think, but that's just the first three which came to my mind now.
I appreciate you joining us today, Leonid, and thanks again for watching CivilNet. I've been Patrick, your host, and we'll catch you next time.